Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Here, Friday, the 7th June of April. As always, just a short coronavirus update here from Denmark. You can say now the whole parliament was behind the furthering of opening up, to further open up Denmark. In that way, now the hairdressers, if they are not in big shopping centers, but if they are outside shopping centers, they are permitted to operate. The courts was permitted to operate. If you're going to physiotherapist and the like, you're also permitted to operate. But still, most of all the shopping centers are still closed, and people are still expected to self-quarantine as much as possible. So, but boarding schools have not been open, and we have this traditional high schools in Denmark. It's where you become educated without grades, which is a very old Danish tradition. It's about learning and learning for life, even though they have not opened either. But there was consensus now when after a lot of negotiation in parliament. So there was not so much political bickering. But still, some of us say, after more than a one in containing, one is getting a little, after being encapsulated, and although one loves one's wife and daughters, one would like also to see some other people's. And in fact, for a person like me, it's terrible in that way that normally I do exercises together with my friend, play football or basketball at least twice a week. So that's really, so I have my abstinences in relation to this. And I think also I'm gaining some kilos. Thanks a lot. So this part will be a follow-up from last Monday, in fact. And in the end, 15 out of 16 submitted. That's very well. Thumbs up. And thank you for your contribution. In general, of very high quality. And some of you even had some things, I hadn't been thinking about that. And that was a good point. I haven't seen that. And thanks a lot. These are the things that we could have found out in class together. But I will try to share as much as possible. Some of you have handed in a little late. And of course, we are living in very unusual times. So I am, and we are all more lean on this. But in relation to this to function, you will have to do it as soon as, within this, not so long after. Because what I usually do is I get the assignments and then I go through the assignments, not the next coming session, but the following. Because otherwise it becomes too old. We have all forgotten it. That was a long time back. So while we still have the things present in the mind, so therefore try to keep in time. Otherwise, I will not be able to read and comment on it and present it. So, and if you have problems, and some of you have come to me about some of the challenges, then tell me about it, and then we'll see whether we can find a workable solution for all of us. Because it is a difficult time. You were all supposed to be in Europe, and then you are stuck either the university at home, or most probably you cannot go so much out either. So I think we have a common sense of the challenges that we have. So please, if there's any big problems, and there had been several assignments here for this week. And most of this is, in fact, it's not due to me. That's very much how to say how the course has been arranged centrally, so that it will be more or less the same course in wherever it has been taken. And of course, I do have some freedom, and I'm trying to exploit that freedom to the utmost to give you also some more sense of what's happening in my part of the world, or if there is some of the things that some of the readings which I find, oh, they are a little history has changed, so now the situation is not like that. Going to the questions, the first question was why is state building an imperative? This is in fact what I have written, and it's very much about, of course, state building is an imperative, and that was also I would say the modernizers after the Second World War. Now it was with all the independent states. Of course, you had to build up the state, and then you also had to build the political system, and then eventually it will all end up in democracy. But you need to have a strong, efficient state who could facilitate or be very active in building up the state. So without a functional state with workable institution that can secure borders, keep people safe, providing political goods for its inhabitants, there's a danger that it will fall into become a failed state. And one thing, and of course I had to give this question, why is it so important for Fukuyama to get all of us to Denmark? And I do know that Denmark in this sense is not Denmark per se, but it's more Denmark as an application. And some of you knew already about it, so it's about the term, which is in fact not coming from Denmark, even though sometimes we have a terrible form of nationalism saying, we're not the biggest country in the world, but we are the best country in the world. And sometimes we are supported by being the most happiest country in the world, to the big surprise of the Danes. But it was something which was coined by Woolcock and Pritchett, and it was really some economist who was it's about also in a democracy, how can you develop or socially mobilize? And it's very much also challenging the United States. It's about one of the foundation of the understanding of United States is the American dream, and they say, in fact, it's a myth, because in fact the development the last many years has resulted in a lot of inequality, and then there's very, very little social mobility. So if you are born as poor, then it's extremely difficult, and it's very few who make it big. So there's hardly any social mobilization. So there's big inequality and hardly any social mobilization. And then you can talk about equality and everyone have the right to vote. Now I'm not going into gerrymandering or something like that. But it's just about, and then they said getting to Denmark, where we in Denmark seemingly we have a society which is completely different in that way. It is there's much more social mobilization. So if your parents were unemployed, or if they come from blue collar workers, there was a lot of social mobility in relation to that. And that has also been his historical, and also because things had gone, the last 60 years has gone very fast. So in my family, it's my parents, they went to school 7 years, both of them, but they got good jobs, and they only went to school every second day because they lived in the rural sites, so they went to schools in the 50s. oh, yeah, in the 50s, and then yeah, I university degree and even a PhD, and that's in fact you see that commonly in Denmark, and so that's about how the social mobilization was, and then it's about having a strong state with strong institution, and it's about having this strong state and strong institution without jeopardizing too much of individual freedom. Because as most of you know, that the strong individual freedoms can in fact also cause that some people are more free than others due to their position or the power they accumulate. What is a failed state? Yeah, very briefly, it's a dysfunctional state, and for the articles we read, it's about under civil war, not capable of controlling its border, lack of legitimacy, does not provide services. And here, and this is how the two articles, they define a failed state. There are several other definitions, and often people don't in fact define what a failed state is, and then sometimes it becomes very politicized. So you can have two states which are completely the same, but one is it's not is yeah, for ideological reason or for other reasons, and I will get into that afterwards. So it's also about the power to label some other countries. Why shall we avoid a failed state? Yeah, but one thing is from, I would say, from a humanitarian point of view, it's terrible for the countries which is affected, costing lives and opportunities and yeah, and quality of life. But it is also very costly for us. Migration, instability, breeding ground for terrorist groups. Syria is a good example with the many migrants who will come from there, and then breeding ground for terrorists. ISIS was very strong there. In Yemen, you also have some terrorist groups. In Somalia and in Libya, is also. But what is also happening in these failed states? In several of them, particularly in Syria, Yemen, and Libya, it also becomes a war with proxy. So these failed states, it's a war between some, just like during the Cold War, when you have some, even though it was very peaceful time, yeah, that was for us in Denmark and United States, but it was not necessarily good for Angola or many other countries where Soviet Union supported one part and another part was so supported by the United States. But this is taking place in Yemen, where it's a proxy war with Iran and Saudi Arabia, and then US behind the Saudi Arabia. In Libya also, it's more complicated. It's Turkey and Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Qatar, which is also playing it. So it's really messy, and sometimes in this region it's also made into a conflict between Shiites and Sunnis. It's also yeah. And then which is not part of the articles, but it's an add-on. It takes a hell of a long time to rebuild a society. When you really have been into these terrible conflicts and with a lot of violence, it takes decades in order to get out of it. And it's not like saying, oh yeah, now you go for war, now we go to peace. No, it can easily swing back and go back to conflict, and then peace again, and then conflict, and that's in fact the World Bank made a very good report 6-7 years about violence and countries the cost of violence and also the cost of civil wars and failed states. And there they used, based on the experience of the time, that in fact for countries to rebuild, it took a long time. It's easier to destroy, and it's more difficult to open. It's in fact a parallel to that is the coronavirus. It's about it's easier to close down a country, but it's much more difficult to open a country and doing it in a proper way. So I can just say, based on what we see in Denmark, and we are a couple of weeks in front of you, you will really have some hard discussions, and it's already started about who is going to decide. Is it the president, or is the governors, or yeah, and what role have mayors, for instance, the mayor of New York in all this? Yeah, it has just started, I think, in the United States. So. Which you call a failed state based on the articles. Many of you write Libya and Syria. Yemen is also one we can say. Several of you mentioned Venezuela, and I'm using the two texts that we have. I will not call Venezuela a failed state, because if Venezuela is a failed state, then several other states, they have to be termed that as failed. Of course, there's a lot of problems, and there's it's being challenged, but one also have to, one shall not be blind about international politics, which, from my perspective, is sometimes extremely dirty, and where the US is playing its role, also in relation to escalate the different things. But of course, the situation is in fact terrible for the people of Venezuela. But it still have a government, and it still provide various services, and the regime still has a substantial amount of control. But it is about, and that has been a discussion, is about some of these. You have these right-wing authoritarians, and they don't want to hand over the power. But it seemingly it's also what we see sometimes in Latin America. It's also the left-leaning populist or authoritarian who doesn't want to give up power. Bolivia is an interesting example where, in fact, the president there, the ex-president, he tried to keep up, to prolong his stay for a long time, and he got support from the Supreme Court, which was not that independent, but in a way, I would say, yeah. But in the United States, where it's always the sitting president who is deciding who is going to be in the Supreme Court. So it's a little similar. It used to be a little similar in Bolivia, but it's better than in other countries like, for instance, Honduras, where they can just change the people in the Supreme Court all the time. That's the strength of the U.S. system, that the Supreme Court judges, they sit there for life. But if Venezuela was a failed state, then many more should be included. And I know very much about, I mentioned before, about Honduras and Zimbabwe. And then why, and in Honduras, it's really been a big cheating. It's a narco regime there. The president's brother is sitting in a jail in New York City, and he had got I don't know how many years term for being involved in drug traffic. The former president's sons, Pepe Lobo's son, he's also in jail former president of Honduras is in jail as well. No, he's not in jail. He just passed away after, but he died in a U.S. prison. And then, in fact, his party in Honduras would like to make a statue and make him more or less into a saint. It's really, really weird. But there it is. U.S. is, and you got a lot of immigrants coming from Honduras because they don't have any options, because it's really a kleptomatic, the government that they have there with the president in front. So there's millions leaving. I think there's, and they say there's out of the 8 million, there's at least 1 million living in the United States. The many illegal coming from there. But there for real political reason or geopolitical reasons, Honduras is off the hook. There, the president is capable of permitted to do everything, and now he will try to extend his term one more. So it is different standard. Zimbabwe again, but that's not due to geopolitics, but that's more the liberation fighter Mugabe. He just kept on to the power, using some sort of a, I would say, old man in Southern Africa, or in Africa, in an African context. He passed away last year, and before that, but he was toppled not by an opposition, in fact by some of his own people. He was 94, to mention a few. So it's about the discussion of the concept. So that's why I wouldn't name Venezuela, and it's sometimes about these concepts is we are very fast to put them on, even though they may not live up to the countries may not live up to, in fact, to that concept. So they are used politically. And here in research, international relations, and comparative politics, we really need to have them out there in order to see, okay, when are we do we base our views on facts, and when are we being manipulated? And that's, like people are saying, in a war, for instance, the first casualty is always the truth. So that's why it's very important always with the media and the control of the media. And then, in fact, also Venezuela is extremely important because they also are oil producing country. What is the major difference? There are many who is to blame for the failed state. But some of them, the major, I would say, it's Rothberg. He's very much on the reason for being bad leaders, and it's internal problems. That's the culprit, or that's the cause. While Fukuyama also put an emphasis on external factors, development assistance, international banks, interventions of other kinds, making things, or the worst, worse. So it's about failed state and people on the verge of failed state. And that's also about, and in order to understand that, you have to understand that for many, many years, then in fact, when development assistance came, it was, there was different conditionalities, and they were nearly always the same. It was about cut the state, liberalize the market, and sometimes it was even with a military intervention coming in, saying, now we are going to help you making democracy. And democracies from abroad has seldom been a solution, in fact, on the contrary. And I think the development in Afghanistan and Iraq really speaks to that. There was somebody who mentioned that Iraq could be a failed state. Yes and no, because in a way it's they do have some sort of a political system, but in fact you have the Iraq, but it's not in control of the Kurdish area, which has extremely control of its own borders, so it's more or less independent. So there you could discuss whether, and let's see what's going to happen, because there was a lot of manifestations or demonstrations before Corona, and there was also this conflict between the United States and Iran, which is which is the fight is taking place, in fact, in Iraq. Then Rothberg, he's from an international NGO, and he has written an essay without a single references. And then he suggests that help should come from outside. See, now we are going to come and help you because seemingly you are not capable of doing it. You bad persons, now we'll help you. And then that's really in contrast with Fukuyama, who in fact say we are part of the, we cannot say that we are not also to blame for what has happened. And that is sometimes when idealpolitik confronts geopolitical interest or geopolitical realpolitik. So ideal and real, where we say something. For instance, I just the other day heard a fantastic speak about democracy of from Obama. I think it was his last in the UN General Assembly, and it was really one could hear the times. And then when you at the same time know some of the things which happened during when he was there, for instance, the coup in Honduras in 2009, it only succeeded due to the support of the United States. Even though it was condemned by the whole Latin America and in fact most of the world, because now Latin America has gone into to become democracies. So that was, and it's again, when you first start to have military coup, it will not take long in order to, then it's not so difficult to make the second and third. Fiji is a fantastic example of that. It was the traditional chief they didn't like who won the election in 1987, but they were also like to be some of the good people, and they had democratic. So after the time they tried to open again, but then they were loosening out again. So they have had several coups after then, and yeah. And then it's also about, and I have written it, but I would be a little naughty here, because then also Fujiyama is an independent researcher. And he is, we can always discuss how independent we are. But while Rothberg, and then it's about interest. But Fukuyama has an interest in making good research, which is accepted as good research also. While Rothberg, he comes from an international NGO, which is involved in the world, and perhaps he doesn't want to slap the hands who feed you, so they are heavily supported by I don't know whether that organization, but they are supported by at least individuals and groups in the United States. So it's not a critique of oneself or one's own country, but it's a critique of the others. It's and so they having an interest in also the position and the way of saying. His article is also very historical, and sometimes I find very ahistorical, because some of the countries he's dealing with, I think he is starting to some of the explanation is too fast, and the international involvement in conflict is completely forgotten. Sri Lanka, you mentioned Sri Lanka. Then, in fact, India was very much involved in, indirectly involved in why the civil war, in fact, developed as it did in the beginning. So, and then the next, which is, I think it's a very much, it's Rothbard tend to blame it's too much government. These people, that's too much government, the powers they have. And of course, there's a lot of misuse of the power. While Fukuyama wants more government, but it's not just a government, but it's a capacitated government. It's a government function, because Rothbard is more related to this too much government, this dysfunctional government. It will not help with less government of this failed state, that's for certain. Then, very shortly on Monday, a real-time class. We should be at least 10 participants, so we will push through. The meeting will begin at 7 o'clock, 1700. That's 5 o'clock afternoon in Denmark, PM. And all of you will start AM 8, 9, 10, 11. And it's written in the announcement when, in fact, please enter 15 minutes before. I will use Zoom, and I will send an invitation in Canvas announcement to all of you. And I will use using the Canvas. There are two articles to read. One of them was already included in our first session, so in fact you already read it. If you're not, then a second chance to read it. And then the next, we'll spend a little time. I will put up assignment or two in order to find out whether you read it or whether you understood the article. But and that's related to participation. Okay, what happened here? Okay. I don't know whether it was the international connection. Ooh, I hope not. There are two, yeah. And I'll try to make two birds with one stone. Make it easier for you also, because you do have, it is difficult under these circumstances. So soon you will have your midterm paper that you'll have to write. And it's very similar to the first paper. So what I will encourage you all is to work further on your first paper. There you can write up to 2,000 words. Because then it's also about having case studies. It's also, it's a work in progress. So instead of you jumping from one to another, then it's more about, okay, it's the same you have, and then it's about how to do. So it's very much about practicing. And I would like to have 4 volunteers for Monday that will present their paper on case study for all of us, based on what you have submitted to me. And then we can in plenum or groups if it's possible, technically wise. Otherwise in plenum, to comment on it and provide comments to how the person could go further, strengthen, increase, expand, forgotten something. So it's about helping. So yeah, so we will all learn from this, and at the same time, it will be helping making the midterm. It will really be a help for the ones. So I would like to have the 4 volunteers, in fact, to write to me here. So I would have it at the latest Monday, That will be, you'll have to submit it on Sunday, that whether you will do it, and you don't have to present so much. It's just, in fact, the crunch of the paper you have. You had 5 maximum. What will take? You have 10 minutes, but it shouldn't take longer time. You can make it as a PowerPoint, and then we'll see whether we can get the system to share it. Otherwise, we will have to share it in Canvas. And I look forward to see you in live the next time, because that I find I really look forward to get this ping pong where we can play and with arguments and where we all will learn something new, just like I learned something new when reading some of your comments. Thanks a lot. So this was this for the first session. Have a cup of coffee. See you soon.